In this video, I'm going to be talking about a piece of writing that all too often gets overlooked and and sometimes even skipped by authors, and I'll tell you why it shouldn't be. And I'll reiterate this again in the video, which is um, one of the things that unfortunately characterizes the world of publication today, and this is more and more the case, is that people are becoming more and more um, limited in their time that they have to devote to reading and writing articles or chapters or whatever. Part this is due to the fact that you have more and more researchers around the world that are submitting articles, and so uh, editors and reviewers simply just have a lot that they themselves are being pressured to publish, but they have a lot on their plate and they don't just have enough time to deal with it all. And so if you can in a very quick way make it clear why your article is worth publishing, draw their interest as soon as as early as you can in the publication process, then you should take that opportunity. And the place to do that is in the cover letter. And so in this video, I'm going to be talking about how to structure that cover letter and why it is important. And so you have many different kinds of cover letter requirements. There's one from the Journal of Molecular Biology. You can send it. It can be sent by email. It's sometimes in part of a part of their electronic form. You can often upload it. Either way, it should be there. And what this statement in this Elsevier journal, this Journal of Molecular Biology, says what most of them say, which is each manuscript is to be accompanied by an electronic cover letter outlining the basic findings of the paper and their significance. Now, that seems like an easy enough sentence, clear enough. But this, I guess, if you're not an experienced author, then understanding what outlining means and the basic findings and the significance, actually, they're kind of loaded terms, and you might not know exactly how to do that. And so I'll try to break that down in this video. So why is a cover letter important? What is its typical structure? I'll give you a few tips, and I'm going to supply you with. All right, so why is it important? Well, clearly it's your first impression. This is the first impression that an editor or an editorial assistant is going to have of you and your research, which means that you also need to be very careful at this stage with English. I've talked about, I think one of the first videos in this course talked about the role of language and how English itself is never enough, at least once a manuscript goes out to review, to reject a manuscript. But what you don't want to happen is for the English to be, not just the English language, but the punctuation and everything else to be so sloppy that immediately you cause a bad impression, and the editor starts to think, okay, well, I'm not even sure I'm going to send this out to review, and then actually opens the manuscript looking for problems with language, since you've already kind of previewed the language quality in poor language quality in a cover letter, then setting off a kind of negative, vicious cycle of then looking for further poor language use in your manuscript. So if you can kind of nail the language quality in the cover letter, then at least you've got that out of the way, where the editor is less likely to look for problems with language in the manuscript. Again, there is such a thing as desk rejection, which is when an editor just simply decides that it's not worth the time of reviewers to look at your manuscript because the English is so poor, and then just returns it without going out to review, which can happen if the English language is so poor, especially in the cover letter, where they just say, well, this is not going to be worth our time. it's your chance to sell your research to the editor. So it's that, the old elevator pitch where you have, one line or two to make it clear why it's worth reading and what its relevance to the journal is, and we'll talk about that in a second as well. Um, you'll need to, in your cover letter, you're going to state that it has no conflicts of interest, and that is important because if you say that it's original, then um, obviously that has relevance to the plagiarism issue, which I spoke about in a previous video, uh, and uh, and making it clear that your work is original is a key part of the cover letter. And if it does come from a thesis or dissertation, but it is original work, then the plagiarism detection software, if it does um, if it does in its report, in the detection software report, if it shows that there is something that is similar that already exists in some database, and they'll know that, well, it's an original work and it comes from this thesis or dissertation, so it won't get thrown out of the editorial process just because of that. And the cover letter is a piece of writing that you want to be very, very careful about because it can make a difference in terms of getting it past that first gate. And so it's worth showing it to others. Write it very carefully. Spend time making it clear what the research is about, and share it with others. Make sure that it is clear what the point that you want to stand out in the cover letter. And we'll talk about now what those points should be. So cover letters have it is a genre that has a typical structure, just like IMRAD in the research article, which is you usually have in this order a brief summary of the research, why it's something new and represents something that is important, a contribution to the conversation. Number three is really important, which is why you chose this particular journal. And what journals don't like is when authors send the same submission to a bunch of different journals because they just want to see which one will take their manuscript. If you make it clear why you chose that journal, then that allays that suspicion. But also because sometimes uh, at a first glance, an editor may not identify why you've chosen that journal. Maybe the title doesn't seem to be really consistent with what the journal's mission is. And if you make it clear, um, if you bridge that gap for the editor, then that can help. Number four, declaring that you've not submitted elsewhere is along the same lines, that this is not a simultaneous submission, that you've chosen that journal because it's, for whatever reason you declare, it's something that there should be a specific reason for it. And then sometimes with some journals, they actually ask you to recommend reviewers. And even ones that you don't want to review. I mean, that's actually happened to me where I've received someone's work that I knew I shouldn't review because there was a personal conflict. I knew the person, I knew the person's work, and obviously I had to, in that case, I had to say, oh, please don't. Um, I politely, I respectfully declined to review this work because there is a conflict. So or there may be somebody who has, for whatever reason, a personal agenda against you and your work. Well, then you might want to put that person's in. But there are some journals that actually ask you to recommend reviewers. So here's one that is an example, and as you'll see, it kind of exemplifies all those things I just mentioned, those ingredients. So, dear editor, I'd recommend this. This is one mistake in this particular example is that if you know the editor's name, put it in there. So here I have, dear editor, we have the pleasure of submitting a phrasal expressions list for your consideration. This is just kind of a first pleasantry. The paper presents a corpus-derived list of 505 most common useful multi-word expressions in English. So it's just basic one-sentence synopsis of what it is, and then one unique feature of the list, called the phrasal expressions list or phrase list, is that since it contains frequency information that matches the top 5,000 word families in English, it can be integrated into existing word lists. As the phrase list fills a pedagogic need similar to that of existing lists, such as Coxhead 2000. So all this part here is talking about what the unique contribution is, and also this gap that exists. And then I go on and say why I've chosen the journal. So I say such as Coxhead 2000. We felt that TESOL Quarterly, where the Coxhead first published their work, clearly was the best journal to submit our paper to. So I'm explaining in this email, okay, well, this is where this conversation has happened in this journal, TESOL Quarterly, and so this is why I've chosen that journal. So you have a brief one-sentence summary there, why it's important, and then why that journal. And if you have those three things in your cover letter, then you're kind of fulfilling the needs of the requirements of that genre. In the Journal for English Academic Purposes, which I mentioned in another video talking about predatory journals and what a legitimate journal should look like. So Elsevier doesn't have, as far as I know, predatory journals. On those kinds of, usually those journals, journal homepages have guides for authors. Read those guides for authors and read them carefully. They're there for a reason. And you can usually download what they call author information pack or whatever. And you should use these, you should read these. Nothing irritates editors more than an author who has clearly not read the editorial guidelines, the author instructions. But also you can use this strategically in your cover letter. So I'll show you what I mean. So here's their author information pack from the Journal of English Academic Purposes. And then you have, the contents are description, talk about their audience, their impact factor, where they're indexed, the editorial board, and the. And what you can do, if you look at the description of these author information packs, is that sometimes you can use a particular wording. And so in this particular case, I was submitting that journal article that I showed in a different video. Especially in the last year's evidence of ELF and non-native English speaking English in international journals. And in the cover letter, I then used the fact that they mention academic exchanges, the fact that they talk about the context of academic study and scholarly exchange, and in the actual wording of the email, I used their own wording, saying, "Oh, this is why I've chosen the journal, because this article the article aimed to focus on the use of English in the context of international academic study and scholarly exchange in the context of international publication." And so, the author information pack is something you should read anyway, to make sure that you are meeting all their formatting guidelines and the maximum word length and referencing conventions and all of that. But also because in the cover letter, you can actually strategically refer. You can actually borrow even some of the wording or adapt it so that it's clear to the editor why you've chosen that journal in the first place. So do take care in the crafting of your cover letter. It is an important part of the submission process.